Okay. So thank you for agreeing to my social experiment. Just going to ask a few questions. In a minute, I'm going to turn around this board, and there's a quote on there, and just like you to consider whether you've seen the quote before, whether you've heard the quote before, and what it means to you as well. Okay.
I've never seen that quote before, no.
Okay. So injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not sure that's true because, I mean, you could have, for instance, a country, where there's injustice or a region there's injustice, but another country which is, has justice, and
Yeah.
so that's not necessarily true. I mean, you could say that if if there's injustice in one part, then wherever the other people have responsibility, but that doesn't mean that another place could not have justice.
Okay. Fine. Do you mind if I just put this down for now?
Yeah,
I think for me, the
yeah.
sentiment is it's actually by a quote by Martin Luther King.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't aware of it until more recently, but it
yeah,
resonated with me because I think that there are injustices that still exist. There's injustices in history that we've overcome,
yeah.
um, but one injustice can't be sort of quantified as more important or less important than another. And if we're against injustice, we should be against all injustices and not just pick and choose certain ones that we want to support or reject.
I'm not sure again on that because we have law that attempts to look after justice,
Yeah.
and sentences vary according to the injustice.
Yes.
So all injustices are not
Do
the
you
same.
think that law always dictates morality or what's right? Do you think that the law always supports what's right in society?
No, I think law tries to, but what's right depends on a lot of things. Depends on culture. It depends on people's point of view.
Yeah.
So I think justice, a law tries its best to find a common ground, and maybe sometimes tries to just find a popular ground.
Popular. I
Yeah.
would agree with you. Can you think of any injustices, current or in the past, that we now think are abhorrent?
Well, abhorrent is a strong term, but I mean, there are injustices, I suppose, against people who are trying to seek asylum, for instance. I think that they are wrongly being made scapegoat for other problems. Um, so I think that is an injustice. They are trying to escape something that may directly or indirectly be, in fact, a result of what we're doing.
Hmm.
But we are trying to look at our shortcomings and trying to. But I mean, that's been the case in history. I mean, if you look at Nazi Germany or anywhere for that matter, and to tell you the truth, that exists everywhere.
Mm.
I think that kind of discrimination or injustice against a minority group, because
Yeah.
obviously it's easier to discriminate against minority than the
Yeah.
majority.
Yeah. Yeah. or the vulnerable. To exploit the
Absolutely,
vulnerable.
that's right. Yes,
Even if
yes,
there was lots of
yes,
vulnerable individuals, it would still be, easier to exploit them. They
yes,
might not know
yes.
about it, for
That's
example,
right.
or
Yeah,
know to the extent they're being exploited.
yes.
Um, so when we talk about injustice, because I've done a bit of research on it, what would you think are key themes around an injustice? How would you qualify an injustice? We've touched on it already a little
Yeah,
bit,
I
but
suppose injustice is. I mean, to me, again, I think this could be personal. What constitutes injustice could even be cultural, to tell you the truth.
yeah,
But injustice is when a person thinks a wrong has been done to them, and there has been no amends. There has been nothing to try and
Yeah.
amend that.
Yeah.
I suppose that's an injustice to that person.
I'd agree. The research when I've done it, trying to sort of consider the typical themes of an injustice are the exploitation of an individual or group. It typically involves some sort of system of injustice, of exploitation, of persecution. They typically include some sort of suppression of the voice of the oppressed groups, so it's very difficult for them to voice how they're feeling, to get their points across and explain why it's not right. And they are typically groups that are more vulnerable in one way, economically, whole myriad of different ways.
Yes,
really.
yes.
Educationally,
I agree with that. Yeah.
cognitively,
Yeah. Exactly,
physical
yeah.
strength ways.
Yeah, I mean that's
Essentially.
reflected in lots of ways. I mean, currently, we have wars going on, Israel, Gaza,
Yeah.
and there are subtle differences in how that's portrayed in different media. I suspect, certainly in the
Yeah.
media here, and then perhaps media in the Middle East, it'll be different. And then, if you look at, say, just here, people who are vulnerable, let's say, mentally disabled, so there is. They have a less of a voice, as opposed to, let's say something like breast cancer or something like that. So that gets a lot of publicity because, typically, of course, it's a very common cancer and there's been a lot of progress made, but that's directly as a result of the funding and the exposure that it's had. Whereas other things, let's say somebody who may have issues around mental health and whatnot, they're not. I mean, it's changing. Some of it's changing certainly recently, but till now, really, they've not really been represented as well. They don't have. So I mean, we within our own society, of course, there is huge, discrepancy between one group of people who have issues and another group, so we tend to prioritize one over the other. And to me, actually, that it's not logical. It doesn't make any sense at all, because, for instance, if we take charities, for instance, certain charities, make millions and millions because people identify with them. Others struggle. I mean, really, you should just have a unified charity, and just the money should be just given out to the groups as they require it, because I don't see any difference between, let's say, somebody who has breast cancer and somebody who may have like mental illness and whatever. The problem is a huge one to both groups.
Yeah. Do we agree that's really insightful? Yeah, thank you for that. Do we agree that we should, as a society, strive for fairness and justice for all individuals?
Oh, we should certainly strive.
Because we're acknowledging that we're not,
Yeah.
we haven't got it there all the time, and
Yeah.
to some extent, there's complexities, like with war and things like that, and certain
Yeah.
countries would argue that they're in the right and they're, acting in self-defense, for example, and the other one would argue, the other one's the oppressor and they're the,
Yes.
they're the ones attacking them rather than the other way around. There's a complexity to it. I'm thinking about, and part of my theory as well is that oppression, and I'm going to just mention a few examples in history that we now would consider unacceptable, and to a large extent they still go on, but they're not legal because we've acknowledged that they're not acceptable. The oppression of women and women's rights,
Yes. Yeah.
of previously children being exploited, child labour. I know it still goes
Yeah.
on, but
Yeah,
we
of course,
don't generally accept that.
Yeah.
present still going on human trafficking, for sex working, or for around drugs and trafficking drugs. Historically, it went on for hundreds of years. Slavery, human slavery, which we now accept. But my theory is that a lot of these injustices in the past went on for so long because, for many people, for the people who got benefit from it, it was inconvenient to change it. And I think that when inconvenience comes into an area of injustice, whilst a lot of people will say they're against a range of injustices, and they may very well be, and they may very well reject them in their actions, when it comes to certain injustices, a lot of people are resistant to that because they get benefit from the injustices, such as certain people did with slavery, as certain people did with oppressing women and women's rights, child labour, some of the examples that I've given. To what extent does that feel?
Well, I mean,
I think there's some truth in that.
You know, what you say is true. I think you know, these injustices were around not that long ago. I mean, women have only had vote in this country, you know, it's 100 years or something. So it's not a long time, really.
And it took a few people on the ground to stand up to that, didn't it? It was met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
People sort of said they were mad.
Yeah.
People tried to propagate that they were, you know, crazy. Why would women need rights? What, you know, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you see, human beings are like any other animals when it comes down to it, which is preservation of self. Mm-hmm. Any animal is exactly the same, you know, it preserves itself. And so human beings also have that innate nature. Now we have like well-developed brains, so we can like think, okay, right, this is not fair, and you know, we shouldn't do this or that, and try to, you know, have some form of fairness across society. Yeah. But usually, actually, you know, on the whole, animals, you know, want to self-preserve. And I mean, we can say, for instance, you know, women were exploited, and of course they were, you know, and people are still being exploited now. I mean, you might say actually the West is exploiting the poor countries right now. I mean, the fact that we are driving around in cars and some people are, you know, drowning as a result of it. We don't see it as a direct result of our action. But I suspect the fact that, you know, one country uses up about, you know, 20 times as much resource as another country is in itself is a huge injustice. So you know, and that's really again to do with self-preservation and what one wants. We want nice cars and big TVs.
I agree with you.
And it doesn't matter what expense it comes at.
And I suppose that where it becomes a little bit more complex, because then we have governments, you know, making decisions for us, don't we? And you know, we have to pay our taxes, and some of the decisions that are made, policies that are made, we don't have any real say on that. So where I'm interested in particular as well is I do acknowledge that systems are what control and govern us as people, and will dictate to what extent certain things are just or not. But what I'm also interested in is us as individuals, and to what extent what power we do have to either accept injustices or reject injustices as well. I suppose I'm talking back again about historically. This is where I've been inspired by as well. We're talking about lead examples of human slavery, of oppression of women's rights, of child labour, which, you know, certainly in this country, you know, we don't allow. So I'm just interested in to what extent you feel that the power of the individual, the responsibility of an individual has to reject injustices if you have the opportunity to do so, or if we have the opportunity to do so. I think that's important.
Oh, absolutely, it's important. But I mean, all the injustices that you outline, you know, it still exists. So we, you know, in the West, you know, in myself including, you know, we're benefiting from slavery around the world. We're benefiting from child labor. We're benefiting from all of this. We know that, you know, when we go to Primark and buy a t-shirt for £1, we know that's come from some kind of injustice.
But
somewhere.
if we have an opportunity then to maybe even spend a little bit more and buy a T-shirt that we are confident, or as confident as we can be, that didn't come from child labour and exploitation, should we have the responsibility to choose the other option if we've got an option between two or more?
Yes, so I think that option is given, and certainly there are some retailers, for instance, may say that their items may be more expensive, but then they may not be affordable to everyone.
Yeah.
And so then it comes down to self-interest. I want that, and
Yeah.
that's all I can afford.
Yeah.
So,
So I suppose if you're not in a position where you're economically stable enough, you're more likely to have to, out of necessity, choose the option that included exploitation. But if you are in a position where you are financially stable enough, for example, just keeping on your example, should we
Yeah.
be choosing the more ethical option of a T-shirt, carrying on with your example?
well, the answer is that we should be, but even somebody who's financially stable, again, has a self-interest to build more wealth, and they don't want to spend anything more than is necessary. If they can buy a pair of shoes for £10, why would they spend?
But what about you?
Myself.
Yeah, would you be that person where you'd
Oh,
think
I'm totally guilty. I mean, I think that to tell you the truth, I think it is next to impossible to live like we do day to day, driving our car to work, go and shop in supermarket and buy the items that have come from wherever. You cannot have a way of life that we are currently living, say in England or any so-called developed country, without having a footprint which involves injustice.
I know where you're coming from, and I agree. So I've thought about this a lot, and I think that, for example, someone working in Morrison's, they might be to some extent getting oppressed, which would be cruel and unfair, unjust treatment by a system. But I suppose what I'd be making the distinction between is a system that includes some level of exploitation and systems that are specifically designed and can only exist by exploiting individuals. So if I'm going back to, again, the examples that you use, the historical ones, they are specifically, you can't improve slavery. We can maybe make better conditions for someone, but it's still wrong. You're improving something that's wrong. We wouldn't say that, okay, slavery is acceptable, human slavery is acceptable if we feed them better food, for example. They still are deprived of their liberty. It's still an injustice, I would put to you, as opposed to someone working in Morrison's who's maybe not getting the best conditions. We can strive to improve that. Can't strive to improve slavery. That's the distinction I'm asking you to consider, and whether you agree with that.
Well, I mean, it's all different extents of exploitation, from somebody in Morrison's to somebody in slavery. One is an extreme exploitation,
But one's an inherent exploitation. It can't exist without it. We should be striving, I would put to you, to make it so that people have fair rights, workers' rights, and that's why we have things like unions that can make sure that they have good, positive working conditions, fair pay. Slavery doesn't include any of that. It can't improve. Child labour. I don't think we'd accept that we improve that by it's taking away the rights of a child to be a child, isn't it? Human trafficking. We wouldn't say, we'll human trafficking's okay. Let's just improve it a little bit, and make sure that they're not put at risk 7 days a week. We'll just make it 5 days a week. To see where I'm coming from.
What I say to you is that West predominantly, but there have been other countries, who have benefited from slavery and are right now benefiting from slavery.
But you and I don't support that, do we, with our money?
Of course we don't support it. We don't support it directly.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't support it directly, but unfortunately, you and I both support it indirectly, just because of our lifestyle. You know, because of the jeans you're wearing, the shoes that you have on.
Well, I actually go to some efforts to try and make sure that mine are, you know, as ethical as they
How
can
can
be.
you? Come on, how
I'm just
can you?
doing research, really, you know, on the internet.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I'm
take
pretty
your
sure
point, I take your
most
point.
of these retailers are not going to say, look, you know, our items are from slave labor and our items are not. I suspect that that's going to be a bit tricky to find out, even for the most, you know, inquisitive of people. My view is, it may be a little bit cynical, but I think that, you know, I don't think slavery has been abolished. I think we're
No, it hasn't.
benefiting right
No,
now
it
from
hasn't.
slavery.
It hasn't, but it's not. But it's not right, though, is it? It's not
Oh,
fair.
It's
It's not
absolutely
just.
not right, of course.
Yeah. We acknowledge
Yeah.
that, and we acknowledge that it's something that we need to strive to abolish.
So it's a little bit like saying, look, you know, I don't agree with it, but, you know, you're condoning it indirectly by your actions. So it's a little bit.
But this is where I'm talking about the individual responsibility as well, and doing what we can. And if we've got a choice between an option that we're confident is not included exploitation, or a system inherently designed on exploitation, child labour, and one, as an example, and one that isn't, should we be choosing the one that isn't, even if it's inconvenient to us, financially or otherwise?
Oh, we should. I think the word strive is an important one. I think we should strive. I think, you know, as decent human beings, we should strive to improve our own lives and trying to improve the lives of others. That's the decent thing to do. The unfortunate thing is that I am well aware that, you know, we do indirectly support all of these things. You know, we buy the products that keeps those factories open, employs those people who get paid, you know, £1 a month or whatever it may be to produce the t-shirts or whatever. So there's no escaping that. I think you have to just come to peace with that and say, well, you know, that's. I think you can certainly, as individual, do things to maybe atone yourself.
Yeah. And we should be also, you know, we should be forcing the issue that that's not acceptable and improve those conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
Again, I go back to, because I am going to come to my point in a minute, and I'm grateful of your time, and you can obviously go whenever you want.
I've got to go. Yeah.
Have you got 2 more minutes?
2 more minutes.
Two or three more minutes.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because there are systems historically. I've talked about the examples, and currently, that still are. Instead of including some level of exploitation, we can strive to improve on, that are dependent on exploitation. Now, the area that I want to put to you is animal agriculture.
Yes.
What's your view on that, and do you acknowledge that that is a system built specifically on exploitation?
Yeah, so I mean, again, you know, I think there is, you know, number one, I don't agree with animal
Farmed
agriculture,
animals.
just how you put it, but it's basically cruelty to animals. Again,
agree.
it's another, just like the shoes and the t-shirts I'm talking about. It's just another thing, you know, we like our KFC and McDonald's and whatnot. We don't really think about where that meat's come from or how the animal's been treated.
Okay. But do we have the choice to reject them? The animal agriculture industry?
Yeah.
Can we do without animal products, either for clothing, food, entertainment?
Well, I think what we should do really is we should try and curtail our appetite really, because I think human beings are supposed to eat animals. You know, they're supposed to eat vegetables. They're supposed to have a balanced diet: fish, meat. But it's the amount that we are consuming right
You're
now.
talking about the environmental impact?
I'm not talking about environment. I think say if you say if everybody eats meat once a week, like at one point there was, I mean, you'd have your Sunday roast and that was it, kind of thing,
But what about?
And
Sorry,
that
go
didn't
on.
that didn't mean that you had to kind of make animals into a big production line.
Yeah, so like
because
factory
there
farming you're
wasn't-
talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely, there wasn't the need for that. But now people consume this at like 10 times.
So yeah, I agree with you.
How do you produce, millions and millions of chickens?
So factory farming, as you said, I totally agree with you. It is cruel.
Yeah.
But I would also ask you. I know you said that you feel that we're omnivores, is what you said, isn't it? Essentially.
Yes.
But are you aware that we don't need to consume any animal products at all
I
to
think
thrive?
I'm aware,
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I mean, I think,
So
I
what?
don't
So if
really-
it's cruel,
Yeah.
why are we doing it to them?
No, I mean, I think.
That's the challenge to you. I'm putting to you.
No, I think as omnivores, we've always. Can we do without it? Of course we can. I mean, I'm a vegetarian.
Are you?
and, yeah, absolutely. So, but I understand people who eat meat. I think, I think that has been since the dawn of man. I'm sure they've hunted, and in fact they've probably hunted before they actually grew crops.
But slavery's been a thing since the dawn of time. Violence has been a thing since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
Rape, war has all been things since the dawn of time, and that's where I'm
Yeah.
coming from. Where we should strive. If we no longer
Yeah.
there's a necessity for it,
Yeah.
why are we doing it? If it's cruel and it's an injustice to them as individual sentient beings.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult one that because let's say the entire planet just survives on plants,
Yeah.
then you would have to pretty much wipe out a lot of the forest because
No, it's the opposite.
how are you gonna? I mean, we're already wiping out most
I
of
know
the
where you're coming.
forests.
I know where you're coming from
Yeah,
because I
to
think
grow
that
crops.
is, some
Yeah.
people feel that's the logical extension, but actually, if you think about it a bit more deeply, and I've done a lot of research on this, have you heard of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change,
No.
global organisation?
No.
Who they've actually said that if all people went plant-based,
Yeah,
we could free up 75% of the world's land. And I'll explain why. Because every year we breed into existence between 80 and 90 billion land animals. There
Yeah.
are between 8 and 9 billion humans.
yeah,
So they outnumber us 10 to 1.
yeah,
All the animals, what are they fed?
yeah.
They're all fed plants. Some of
Yeah.
these animals are really big animals, need
Yeah.
a lot of food,
Yeah,
and that's why.
Yeah,
If
that-
we just
that-
went direct to source, actually, it's actually the flip of what you said. We'd
Yeah.
have a lot more land.
Yeah.
Environmentally, it would be a lot more sustainable. As it is now, it's just not
Well,
sustainable.
if that's the case, I'd say we should all become
Do you?
vegetarian
Do
like
you?
me.
Well, vegan. Do you know what vegan means?
Vegan means that you don't have any animal product,
That's certainly a part of it.
like milk, for instance.
Yeah. So vegan means, in essence, respecting animals, respecting them enough not to exploit, torture,
Yeah.
or slaughter them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, if you have milk, you're not torturing any animal.
I'm afraid you are. So
I think
I'm
so.
gonna.
I mean, I tell you what. I mean, I grew up in India,
Did you?
and and they used to milk cows. That was not torture.
can I
I know
say-
what they do here is totally different in factories.
It's pretty much universal.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a card in a minute. I'm mindful of your lack of time. I'm going to give
Yes,
you a card,
yeah,
and you
thank
can also watch this back. You're not on screen. I'll just reassure you.
Oh, thank you.
Um, But so with the dairy, I'll just run it through dead quickly. It is extremely cruel. It's probably the cruelest animal agricultural industry. I'll explain why. A cow needs to be pregnant in order to give milk. So
Yeah.
the farmers don't wait around for them to decide when they get pregnant. They decide
Yeah.
for them. They get a big sort of syringe. It's like
Yeah.
a big rod.
Yeah.
They insert
Oh,
with
yeah,
a glove one arm up the anus, and then they insert it into the vagina. Insert
Yeah,
bull semen.
yeah,
They have to
yeah.
masturbate a
Yeah.
bull in order to do that first of all. So that's
Yeah.
already sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
When the when the calf's born,
Yeah.
the cow is separated from their mother,
Yeah.
usually within 24 hours. The reason for that is because they don't want the calf to drink the mother's milk. They want that to
Yeah.
be sold for human consumption. So that's already very distressing.
Yeah,
And
but
there's been
I think what you're talking about there is mass production. Now, I grew up.
It's universal.
I grew up where they used to have like one or two cows. They used to milk the cows. There was still enough for the calf. The calf used to also have it. There was no pipes and there was no exploitation. These cows were worshipped, in fact. So
Well, India is actually the third largest exporter of beef.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I know that
that's
they're a
right.
sacred
Yeah,
animal,
yeah.
but it's a bit of
Well,
a.
I mean, again, I would lay the kind of fault at our table because the West has always exploited. The rich countries have always, and rich exploit the poor in this country, and rich countries exploit the poor
Yeah,
countries.
yeah.
I mean, where do you think all our waste goes?
I know, I agree with you, and that's wrong. But what I'm saying is, as individuals, we can reject that if we think that's cruel. And
We
it's
can
only
reject
only
it, yeah,
an
yeah.
cumulative effect of doing that where we build up a movement.
Yeah.
This is the reason I'm out here today, to encourage people to consider
Very
that.
good. Yeah.
The other thing to say is, I did mention the calves if they're born male. What do you think happens to them?
I suspect that they're probably, slaughtered. Yeah.
Sometimes on the first day. But so
yeah,
is that fair?
well,
Is that just?
Of course, it's not fair, but I think there was a time when there wasn't this hunger to consume 20 times what we need to consume, which in itself causes its own problems. But at that time, people could survive on just having fewer animals which were looked after because they were their livelihood.
Yeah.
And perhaps even now in some villages, people survive on the fact that they have a couple of cows.
I agree. There might be some people in certain areas of the world where it's necessary for them, but
Yeah.
would you agree that where we are, it's not necessary for us? You
Oh,
said
it's
before, we don't
absolutely
need
not.
to. We can
Yeah.
completely reject it. I've been vegan
Yeah.
now for almost 6 years.
Oh, very good.
And
Yeah.
I only because I became aware of people talking to
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
watching some documentaries, doing my own research, seeing these practices that go
Yeah.
on, and I thought, I don't want to be any part of that. And if I don't
Yeah.
need to be any part of that, and if I can get all my nutrition, and if I can enjoy my life without and thrive without that,
Yeah.
why would I do that?
Absolutely right.
see what I mean?
I think on an individual level, everybody can do something. And you and I have both done something, and I don't think, it's up to everybody to think for themselves. Now, for me, do I like milk? Yes. I mean, would I eat meat? Yes. But I know that the way that they are now being farmed, the animals, I don't want to be part of that, and that's the reason.
You gotta go
and
big.
I've done my bit for that.
Well,
I
you do, but you know that the dairy industry works in hand with the meat industry, don't you? We talked about the carb.
Of course, yeah.
I went vegetarian initially, and I thought that was enough, and then I realised it's really just
Yeah.
one of the same industry.
Yeah,
It's all
absolutely,
one and
yeah,
the same.
yeah.
I do respect you, for having that, making that first step towards vegetarian. I would encourage you to consider veganism because it's a logical extension. Because you seem like an intelligent, compassionate person, and it's people like you who have a greater responsibility.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah,
Can I give you a card?
I think change always has to start with yourself.
I'm going to give you a card. Okay. So on here, these are on YouTube. The most important speech you'll ever hear by someone called Gary Yourofsky on YouTube. If you search for that. So
Okay.
I know it's not very.
Yeah, that's all right.
Good card.
Yeah.
Dominion. It's a documentary. It's actually narrated by Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
He talks about all the different types of animal agriculture. Now,
Yeah.
I watched some of it and I couldn't watch too much because it was so
No,
disgusting.
no,
So if you can't watch
fine.
that, like I couldn't, the most important speech tells you about it without going through all the showing
All right,
you.
okay,
It's too
fine,
gruesome
yeah,
for me.
yeah,
It's just too
yeah.
upsetting for me.
Yeah.
Challenge 22. If you
Yeah.
decide to go vegan, they will hook you up with a nutritionist, send you recipes
Yeah.
every single day, give you advice
Yeah.
about going plant based
Yeah.
and then this is my YouTube channel. It's getting created. It's not ready yet, but if you check in the next few days,
Yeah.
#freedom on YouTube, and you'll be able to watch this, listen back. You won't be on screen. I keep reassuring you.
What's your name?
Mine is Tim.
Tim.
Tim Gleave.
Tim
Gleave.
Cleve.
Gleave. Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Tim.
Nice to meet you. What's your name?
Kumar.
Kumar. Really
Yeah.
nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
likewise, yeah.
conversation, and please give
Yeah.
it some thought.
No. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed
Like I
it.
say, people who are intelligent, compassionate like yourself,
Yeah.
I feel that we have a greater responsibility to make the changes that we want to be ourselves.
Yes, I think if you can make changes that doesn't negatively impact your own lives, and certainly say some of the changes I've made hasn't, in fact, it positively impacted my life, then why wouldn't you do it? So
Yeah. Kumar, thanks so much. Thanks again.
Nice